Hello, I'm Toby. I like Doctor Who, and I'm about to watch a story chosen for me by a friend with the aim of mining it for positives in order to guess what their favourite things about this particular adventure are. So join me, watch along with me if you like, or just listen as I chat to you, offer facts, opinions and observations, but mainly try to get us to those special planes that Doctor Who takes us to, those happy times and places. Welcome to Happy Times and Places, with me, Toby Haydock. So who's my special guest this time around?
Hello, Toby, and incidentally, hello to all of you at home. My name is Tom Burgess. I'm arguably a comedian, and to one audience that really sticks out in my memory, passionately arguably not. But fortunately, the world being what it is at the moment, it seems unlikely I'll ever be able to gig to them again. Now, I'm recording this message for you entirely on location, because the story I've picked for you to watch, Toby, is the Sontaran experiment. I think the reason I've chosen this one really is that it's the first Doctor Who story of the original run I ever saw back in 1998 on VHS. I was 6 years old, and I think even if it hadn't been coupled up with Genesis of the Daleks in that double video pack, I still would have come out of it a huge fan. So I think it's really easy to take a two-part story for granted, especially when it's sandwiched between two of the all-time greats. But there's loads to enjoy in it. And to make that point even clearer, I'm actually going to tell you 2 things per episode I love. So you're going to have 5 things in total. See if you can manage that. Best of luck!
Well, welcome everybody. It's time for the Sontaran experiment. Well, welcome everybody. I hope you're okay. I'm staying up at a ridiculous hour to watch the Sontaran experiment. What did you do during the plague, Grandad? Oh, well, I waited till everyone had gone to bed and I watched old episodes of Doctor Who and talked to nobody. So if you're out there, thank you for being there. Nice to be with you. Welcome to my home. I have got up, and I hope you have too, the Sontaran experiment. Mine is all on Blu-ray, and I'm going to press play or enter or play all or select or whatever it is. I'm doing play all now. Well, hello. It's interesting, isn't it? It's a 50-minute Doctor Who story, a two-parter, so rare back in the day, and this is something you sort of pop on. You go, well, I haven't got very long, and it's quite slight because it's two-parters. It's never long enough to tell a story, and of course, 50 minutes is what we tell a story in these days. And of course, yes, there's no such thing as a story arc back in the day, and this is a literal story arc. It started in the arc in space, and it goes on to here, and then the whole setup of Genesis has a ramification for the fact that they're not travelling in the TARDIS. It's an odd thing, actually, Tom Baker's first season, because we think of the Hinchcliffe era breaking new ground. Producer Philip Hinchcliffe comes in and makes the show more muscular. That's a nice word that he uses. The Doctor bends his knees as he lands. But actually, this first season, one, it's got the very unusual thing of most of it takes place around the travel to and from the Ark in space. But also, it's largely old writers. John Le Carrotti was originally to write the Ark in space. This is Bob Baker and Dave Martin, who've written for the Pertwee era quite a lot. Terry Nation writes the next story. Jerry Davis the next. And major surgery was required, so I wonder if that's what, when Philip Hinchcliffe, when he was left to his own devices, never called upon the likes of Jerry Davis. Terry Nation has a go, doesn't it? Android Invasion. And Bob Baker and Dave Martin. But it's just this feels like they're sort of trying to recapture, get some of the '60s back, which I don't really think of in this era. I love this opening. All of the rapport between the fact that she's got a thorn in her bottom. There's very few references to bottoms in Doctor Who. Only in My Dignity. She is so good. When I was young, I have elder brothers and sisters. Sarah was dismissed by them as, she just screams. She was before my time. My earliest memories, sort of Leela, really. And she's such good value. The thorn in her bottom, the covering of her face with the hat. She can even pull off a yellow cagoule. I love these three. I think Ian Marter has a tricky job. I think Harry is sometimes written as a buffoon, and I think he's sometimes got lines that are quite difficult to pull off. But I remember when I was reading about Harry Sullivan, I thought he was a sort of tough guy and not the sort of posh sailor. But he does it very well because he's so charming. And Tom Baker's arrived. I mean, he's not been playing the Doctor very long at all. And he's so good. He inhabits it already. There's nobody like him, is there? He was my first Doctor, and I think it's easy to take him for granted. But he is Doctor Who. that grin, all the business that he does. And this is directed by Rodney Bennett, who knew Dartmoor. He wrote books about Dartmoor, so I think he was at home here. I mean, obviously, if we did this now, it would be more of a. Would it be more of a? Yeah, I think you'd have I think you'd have fun with monuments and bits of buildings sticking out of the ground. Whereas this just sort of reminds me of the Yorkshire Moors or whatever. I love I love that musical motif. The blah, 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 blah. And it's unusual, isn't it? Because it looks lovely. Although I do wonder. I like a bit of film. I always felt the Doctor Who looked a bit more grown up and expensive, which as a child was the two things I wanted it to be when it was on film. Videotape is slightly less forgiving, but although this actually looks really nice, and that point of view shot of the Doctor's quite, he's being observed. That rattly music is great, isn't it? And he's in the Terry Walsh is there. Now that's interesting because sometimes I think 70s hair doesn't help Doctor Who, but actually the fact that these guys have been there for because if you think about Kenton Moore, Noah in The Ark in Space, he's got tidy 70s hair. I don't think that's dated particularly well, but these guys, because they've got the long 70s hair, because it's unkempt and because they've allowed their beards to grow a bit, the 70s hair thing, I think it doesn't look like 70s hair. It looks like guys who've been stranded on a planet for ages. So isn't that funny that within the space of one story, 70s hair, which I think in Ark in Space is a bit of a disadvantage here, I think is really helpful. I'm just testing my sound. No, my sound's right. Because of the trap and the mystery. It's quite a straightforward story, although it's a very interesting story. But and of course I have to be thinking about what my lovely Tom Burgess has decided is the best two things about this. We're doing 2 per episode because it's a 50-minute. It's the equivalent of a modern series episode. I won't be including the android in my favourite things. It's a funny choice, isn't it? That's a great shot though. It's a funny choice to have something sort of on spindly legs to be a sort of all-terrain creature. You see, if you're played by Terry Walsh, you are going to end up falling off something sooner rather than later, and in this case, sort of sooner. But I do like a stunt. Always adds a bit of drama. He's landed very well. He's dead, Zake. But yeah, the sort of tea trolley, the bewhiskered tea trolley of the android. He's killed Zake. Are you saying you only noticed Zake at that point? Doesn't matter. And that's great because, within the minutes, the TARDIS crew are split up without going, shall we split up? One of them's fallen down a crevasse. One of them has been lured away by hearing a fellow in peril and has ended up getting captured. And that leaves Sarah all on her own. That's really nice economical storytelling that sets up various different mysteries because, what's this mystery? Who's attacking Harry? Who laid the trap for Harry? And then who are these guys? Who killed these guys? So it's layer upon layer very quickly. She's great, isn't she? I mean, I was saying before, she was dismissed by my elder brother's a bit of a thug. So maybe that's why. But I think my brothers I've got two brothers and a sister, all older. And I think they all were a bit down on Sarah. So I wasn't in a particular hurry to see her when I started collecting episodes because Sarah was a screamer, and it's amazing how that being sort of planted in your head means it's sort of received wisdom. But actually, she's magnificent. I mean, I think she's so good. She gives value to everything that she does, and in these days where you cutting and editing, a lot of cutting was done, particularly in studio, was done sort of as live. It was vision mixed, whereas when you shoot on film, you can choose every sort of nanosecond. Actors that sort of keep things interesting were gold dust, and she's one of those. She's always thinking about how to add character to the action, which helps to sell the action or helps to bring something different to the action. And I think she's very inventive. I quite like they threaten him with a smoking stick. Now, Krantz is played by Glyn Jones, which I didn't know, Fred, because in the Doctor Who magazine episode guide, I remember it was Kranz Glyn Johns, and there's an actor called Andrew Johns in Genesis of the Daleks, and it seemed like an echo of that, because of course there's Terry Walsh in this and Peter Walsh, but Peter Walsh with an E, who plays Eric. So it's like sort of funny echoes. But Glyn, I thought, is it Glyn Johns? And of course it's not, it's Glyn Jones. Now that, of course, is very different, because Glyn Jones, I knew the guy who wrote the Space Museum was actor-writer Glyn Jones, and suddenly, so the guy who plays Kranz in this wrote the Space Museum, so he becomes one of that small but illustrious bevy of people who have written for and acted in Doctor Who. Take a bow, Victor Pemberton. Take a bow, Mark Gatiss. Take a bow, Toby Whithouse. And what I love is that Glyn Jones came to the show for both jobs completely independently. He's writing in the 60s, come over from South Africa, and wrote the Space Museum. And then, of course, years later, they're looking for actors with South African accents. So it's not that, let's get Glyn in, he wrote a story. It was because it was a totally different regime. So I like that tale. And when I started my podcast, Toby Haydock's Who's Round, I sort of put a general plea on the internet, and I got an email from Glyn Jones's mate, a chap called Douglas in Crete, where Glyn Jones lived, saying, oh yeah, my friend Glyn Jones will do it, and he was one of the first interviews I did, which is slightly annoying because in those days, I felt that people who agreed to do interviews, I was like, well, I won't take up too much of their time. But actually, the inconvenience is agreeing to do it. Once you've agreed to do it, people are perfectly happy. And I think if I'd known what I knew only a month or so later, I would have done a longer interview with Glyn Jones. As it was, I'm very flattered and happy that I had that contact with him. I was slightly unprepared because I'd set up the Skype call early and I was just doing a test, and I think he'd noticed that I was on Skype, so he called, and it was an hour earlier, so it was about 6 o'clock in the morning where I was, and I'd not had time to sort of settle in. But anyway, it is what it is. It was one of the first interviews I did for my podcast, so have a listen to that. It's on the Big Finish website, and he was a lovely fellow, and he sent me a copy of his Space Museum script afterwards, where Vicky is called Tanny. I mean, amazing. So yeah, and I think he felt that his costume, because it was so cold apparently, he feels he looked. That's where the advert was, because I first watched this from Super Channel, and there was an advert there, you know where the Doctor is, and whoever had recorded the copy that I got hadn't unpressed pause until Verrill comes in here, so there's bits of the action here, that bit with Eric pulling the Doctor's hair that I didn't see for about until relatively recently, I don't think, because my video copy from Super Channel had that bit of the action missing. They look great, these guys. You know, I buy them as stranded astronauts. I love the South African accents. I used to sort of mimic this, and Donald Douglas, who's not South African, playing Verrill, is a very good actor, but also he does the South African thing very well. The others are all Glyn Jones is South African. Terry Walsh doesn't have any lines. Peter Walsh, who plays Eric, I think was brought up in South Africa. He's still about. He's a businessman. You can find him online giving talks about, I can't remember what his business is now, but about selling your business. And his son, Peter Walsh, who plays Eric, his son worked on the crew of the shoot where Jodie Whittaker was revealed as the Doctor, you know, that they showed through Wimbledon with her feet, and you know, the reveal, the 13th Doctor reveal. He was on the crew of that, and he didn't act for long. He's in The Naked Civil Servant in the last scene, but he also, Peter Walsh, he returns to Doctor Who. Under less glorious circumstances. Rodney Bennett uses him again in The Mask of Mandragora, where he utters the immortal line, "I ain't going down there, Giovanni, not for all the gold in Rome." It's just very funny. But I like this South African crew, and I think using everybody having the same accent to suggest, because where everything's, you know, a lot of telly is RP at this time, unless you've got a job that involves getting your hands dirty, in which case you can be northern, or unless you're a bit of a wide boy when you can be a cockney. But you know, unusual accents in Doctor Who are you know, are relatively novel, and I think that gives these characters their own sort of special thing. And it does what it suggests, what it's supposed to suggest as well, that they are sort of from an independent colony. And I think they do a good stab of it, because they haven't got a building, they've got a fire, and I like that they're eating a bit of stuff here and picking bits off of it, and chucking the bits they can't eat, and you know, have a chat while they eat. I like all of that. I buy it. It's sort of down and dirty. Yeah, you get the impression that they've got makeup that makes it look like they've been outside a long time and haven't had much sleep. It's I think the depiction of these three guys, who could be quite boring, is one of the strong points. And the little idioms they have, like, you know, check and you understand and all of that sort of thing. I even like the way Donald Douglas chooses food. I like actors who just do bits to make it. And I love Roth, poor old Roth, the scared, slightly broken, mentally broken fellow, Peter Rutherford, who when I moved to Manchester was doing a play up the road here at the Royal Exchange in, what would that be, 92, something like that, and I was like, oh, he's still acting, that's good. And I should have left a note and done an interview, but I was a young student. I had discos to dance at and young ladies to fail to pick, impress. He's they've bought into the Doctor's sort of obtuseness in the writing and what they give Tom Baker to do really early. All of this stuff about I love clocks is gloriously obtuse. And the timing when he adds to the cuckoo clocks, that's great. And they're acting. You could tell it's quite. I think it was really, really cold there. That's what Glyn Jones said. Anyway, Glyn Johns, I'm doing it now. Yeah. Terry Walsh, Peter Walsh, and that happens sometimes quite a lot. I remember in the Hartnell era, there's William Hartnell, Stephen Dartnell, William Hartnell, William Russell, William Hartnell, William Hartnell, Stephen Dartnell, William Russell. There's a sort of. It's like they've only got a certain amount of letters to go round. Which I wonder if you'd be allowed a machete. They've got a machete. And of course, it's called the Sontaran experiment. It's only a two-parter, but we don't. Yeah, we created an empire. Yeah, I buy that. Yeah, so and that's a nice contrast to the sort of sterility of and the formal language of everybody in the Ark in space. Yeah, well done, Donald Douglas, just giving the impression that no guys, don't run off. We've got a prisoner here who we have to leave to escape for plot purposes. But at least he plays lip service to this or arm grab service to this. It's a funny old coat, Tom Baker. It's useful. It's good he had that coat. It's almost like he was planning to break his collarbone, which he does shortly later. So Rodney Bennett, who directed this new Dartmoor, in fact wrote books about Dartmoor. I was very lucky to go and visit him at his house. He was a charming man, quite old-fashioned courtesy he had. And he said "orf" instead of "off," which I always found very charming. He and his wife Jill invited me to their house in Bath and gave me great hospitality. That's how he spoke, and it was lovely. It was so disarming. And he had mobility problems there at that time, and I think quite a lot in later life. I found your sonic screwdriver. Shh, what would I do without you? I love that exchange. These guys haven't been working together for very long at all. They've totally hit it off. And actually having this location like this is great, isn't it? It gives it a real, I'm going to use the word verisimilitude, which I get into trouble for from Radio Free Scaro as a word. Stephen Shapansky says I use that word all the time. He's probably right. But yeah, Rodney Bennett was very good friends with Maureen O'Brien. This is directed this and Ark in Space, and Mascom and Dragarin was a sort of, when I was a kid reading Doctor Who magazine and stuff, Christopher Barry and Michael Bryant and people like that were interviewed quite often. Nobody interviewed Rodney Bennett for quite a while. And the rival school in Grange Hill's called Rodney Bennett, isn't it? And I've got a feeling, I don't know, I did a Who's Round with him, have a listen. If it's not there, the answer is, I'm going to give you... So I think I said, oh, and of course, you're named after the school, the rival school in Grange Hill is named after you. And he didn't have a clue what I was talking about. So I think that was one of those things where we went, it's this thing. And it was nothing to do with that at all. I may have misremembered that. He may have gone, yes, absolutely, I invented Grange Hill, but I don't think the school in being called Rodney Bennett has anything to do with him at all. Hello, the robot. If there are any Grange Hill people for whom I've misremembered that, write in and I'll do a I think you'll find, because the law with these things is I'm doing some quite factual podcasts. These are more, you've come to my house and we're watching Doctor Who together and we're just having a chat. I make no claim to factual accuracy. Then why do we bother listening, Toby? I haven't quite figured, because I hope you enjoy my company. I love the Sontaran spaceship, and I love the fact that they've stayed more consistent than the Sontarans themselves. And look at that dripping water and all of that, which again, it seems like such a small thing, but actually you don't get water in a studio much. So having water and on location, having the elements, and you could see the actor's breath, when sometimes a grassy knoll would be a bit of sackcloth on a few stage mounts, So I'm loving the rocks actually, and that's a great angle. Oh God, we're at the end of episode 1 already. So Peter Rutherford, yes, was at the Royal Exchange, and I didn't speak, and he died mid-90s, I should think, which is very sad, but was still acting, so still kept a career going, so good for him. And here's Lynx. Not Lynx, it's Styre, but she thinks it's Lynx, because the beautiful thing about the Sontarans is that they are clone creatures, so you can reuse the assets in order to save money, except their masks in the classic series are never the same in any story. So there we go. Right, I haven't named 2 things yet. So, the Sontaran Experiment, episode 1. Well, I'm definitely going for the South African brogue and general demeanour of the Galsec astronauts. I like the whole. Press pause, Toby. I like the South Africanness of the crew, and I just love the rapport between that. I mean, that opening scene, everything that those characters do, all that banter that they have, it's so fresh, it's so easy, it's so much of it's not on the page. It's gold dust when you're making television in the 70s to have that sort of chemistry and that sort of extra value from your actors. So I would say the dynamic of the TARDIS crew and the South Africanness of of everyone else. Bar Terry Walsh, because he didn't say anything. He was just there to fall off a thing. What has my friend Tom Burgess elected to choose?
Hello again, Toby. Well, you've watched the Sontaran Experiment, and in the meantime I've moved to a different bit of the location I'm in, like they used to do on the Years tapes in the 90s. And in the last 50 minutes I have broken my collarbone, I've been captured by 3 South Africans, and I've sucked the innards from a potato. So in many ways we've had the exact same experience. Now I'll tell you my favourite things from the Sontaran Experiment. My first of 2 favourite things from part 1 is the TARDIS crew. How lucky was I to see this TARDIS crew for my first ever proper episode of Doctor Who. I think Harry and Sarah's relationship in that first scene where they all touch down on Earth is lovely. Tom Baker is, at this stage, still quite an unknown quantity. He's calmed down from Robot and there's a bit of a dry humour creeping through. I think they're an absolute delight to watch. My second favourite thing from the Sontaran Experiment, which again I remember making an impression from the first time I watched it, is the music. Like it's easy to take a 2-parter for granted, I think it's really easy to take Dudley Simpson for granted when he's basically doing all the music all the time. He's just the bread and butter of Doctor Who, isn't he? But what really stands out for me is the sort of shriek that the music gives at the end of part 1 when Steyr takes off his helmet for the first time. It stabbed into my heart like a dagger. Then we're on to part 2.
Oh, no, we're not on to part 2 yet. I'm going to go on to part 2, but that will be in a separate broadcast. So, Tom chose the TARDIS crew and Dudley Simpson, and I like, I mentioned the but I didn't choose it as one of my favourite things, which means I can't choose it next time. So, we're even Stevens, because I chose one of his and not the other. He's good value, is Tom, isn't he? Welcome back to my gaff. It's going to be episode 2 of the Sontaran experiment. It'll be torture. Quiet at the back. Press play now. Interesting, I was musing about I haven't had time to look it up, the Rodney Bennett and Grange Hill thing. I know there was a reason. I'd either thought it was the case and discovered it wasn't the case. And it's a terrible thing when I've interviewed people now. Because I'd read this, I'd read Doctor Who magazine, I'd watch these things, I'd soak up this stuff and commit it to memory. That's why I know that Glyn Jones is Glyn Johns in the Doctor Who episode guide in Doctor Who magazine for this particular issue. But when you're interviewing somebody, you've got your eye on everything, on the next question, on making sure it's all recorded. That actually, I don't take any of it in when I'm doing the interview. Then I hate listening to myself afterwards. So I think there's probably stuff, if you've listened to my podcasts, you probably know more about what the people who made it think than I do. Now, it is a very good mask. I prefer the Lynx mask because I like the bristle. I like the closeness of it to his skin, and it's a better fix to Kevin Lindsay's face, and I like the prickly beard that he has. But this is a good mask. It's like the Gollum, as you look the same, except you don't, because the actor who played you had breathing difficulties with the last mask, so we've made one that's a bit airier. Identical? No, I'm not. And nor I mean, it's not as bad as the Invasion of Time, where the same Sontaran looks different between studio sessions. Storr has almost a moustache in one set of studio sessions and not in the other. No, in the OB sessions he's got different makeup. But I remember in the book, Harry thinks that Steyr looks like the Gollum, and I get that. Poor old Roth. It's sort of, he served his purpose, and he's killed. But I love that. Why did you make that disagreeable noise? And that sort of bluntness is horrible. And what does he say? The moron was of no further. So he is quite mean, but he's quite deadpan with his meanness. And I love the way he holds her face. Yeah, when he does that, he treats her like a sort of specimen. And Kevin Lindsay as Steyr is great. I mean, he's off the back of playing Lynx, which is one of the very best man in a monster costume performances in the whole of Doctor Who, I think. But we'll come to that when we talk about the Time Warrior at some point. I love his reaction to this. He's not very happy to see you. He's brilliant. He's such a sort of gleeful troublemaker. Obtuse. I've said it 3 times now. Obtuse is the new verisimilitude. You heard it here first, folks. I didn't quite understand in the book. The book is quite a sort of sweaty, headachy affair with lots of sort of parched throats and people, stumbling about blindly. He's very visceral, Ian Marter, when he writes the books, which I found quite unpalatable as a youngster. I preferred them to be slightly sort of easier to experience. I found his books a bit much, and there were ones I had to sort of take a run up to. Give me a break. I started reading them quite early, but I definitely found the Terrance Dicks ones more accessible than the Malcolm Hulks and certainly the Ian Martyrs. But I remember I remember how he fleshed out in the book. But I was too young to get that the prisoner, this prisoner here, played by Brian Ellis. Oh yeah, but Peter Walsh and Terry Walsh, and you've got Brian Ellis, who is in Mask of Mandragora, also directed by Rodney Bennett. But he's also in Revenge of the Cybermen. In a couple of stories' time, there is Brian Grelis. So you've got Brian Ellis, Brian Grelis, Peter Walsh, Terry Walsh. There are only a certain amount of names to go round. That nobody's actually told this prisoner to be South African, though. I suppose it doesn't really matter. And that's only just occurred to me. It's never bothered me before. And it's really horrible, this. But I thought Roth had been sort of baked by the laser gun and sort of left to die, and that was who Harry had found. I hadn't picked up on the fact that he was an. I read a lot of them. It was only when I came to the books the second time round that I understood all of them, because I was reading stuff that was above my reading age. But that's okay. I still had a great time, and I learnt stuff, and I learnt some stuff that was wrong. But then I went back to them because, Doctor Who rewards repeat visitings, which is why this is probably the 21st, 22nd time I've seen this. That seems bizarre, isn't it? I've never read The Mill on the Floss, but I've seen the Sontaran Experiment over 20 times. And you know what? I don't care. It's whatever gets you through this life. And Doctor Who's got me through thick and thin. I like Kevin Lindsay's diction because he was an Australian. And he's an Australian doing RP, which gives him this slightly pinched kind of, because he's trying to slightly flatten out his. He's trying to sort of anglicise his colonial vowels. But he's, instead of being Australian, he's sort of flattened them out a bit and gone the moron was of no feather. So it's slightly pinched, and it works, and it gives the Sontarans. Well, I mean, it's certainly better than Derek Deadman in Invasion of the Time, who is an avowed Cockney, and Clinton Green in The Two Doctors. I would dearly love to kill you, Doctor, is very Welsh. Very good force field acting here and just that very simple sound effect and the modulation of the sound effects. In fact, it gets more intense as he pushes. It's just a lovely, simple way of selling that illusion. Well done, everybody. Knock his bally head off. She's so good. And I love these rocky outcrops that they've gotten again, because I think they planned to have some interiors, didn't they? I think a hut for the Galset guys, and perhaps the inside of the spaceship. I know they wanted some interiors, but instead they've just sort of built it all into the landscape. And why not? Why wouldn't Steyer get his space telly out of his ship so he can just you can have it at an important vantage point or whatever. And again, this is very clever use of resources, because yes, the Sontarans are identical, so you've got Kevin Lindsay playing both characters, which makes up for the fact that he's barely in episode 1. It's weird. I've seen him in the odd episode of Z-Cars and things like that. I remember seeing something advertised saying Robert Lindsay stars in, and I was like, oh, Robert. And so for ages, Robert Lindsay and Kevin Lindsay were slightly interchangeable for me, but of course they're very different beasts. I've seen Kevin Lindsay in sort of things like Z-Cars and stuff. And he's he's a sort of, he's a character actor of the time. He was a milkman in an advert as well, wasn't he? He had quite a famous advertising campaign. But I think this was his last job. He he was he died in 1975. I think a couple of months after this was broadcast. In fact, I think Elizabeth Sladen said that it was when they were recording Pyramids of Mars that the news came through that he died. That's a good snake for a very short effect. And Kevin Lindsay's partner was Trevor Bentham, who you won't find this in any Doctor Who magazines, who was the stage manager of the Royal Court Theatre. I think he was the stage manager of the Royal Court Theatre. Is that right? Who later became the partner of the actor Sir Nigel Hawthorne. And when Nigel Hawthorne died, it was terrible because they were a gay couple, but I think it predated civil partnerships, or certainly there was an inheritance issue, and Trevor Bentham, I think, had to sell up their property that they'd lived in together as a couple because of archaic and silly laws. Thankfully, we've moved on. That's relatively recent history. Elizabeth Sladen did all of that fear brilliantly. Barry Letts said, didn't he, when she auditioned, lots of actresses were good at being scared and lots of actresses were good at being brave, and she was scared whilst being brave, and that's a very good summation of of the attitude that she brings to it, which really helps with the drama all the time. Is that she's gutsy, in spite of the fact that she's terrified. So my brothers and sister were wrong. I mean, they were young as well, but they were wrong. I do quite like the little spin that he does, and then it's the same shot, isn't it? He actually reacts early to that gunshot, but I think it was the same shot as when he shot Roth. Worm. And I think that was the advert break on Super Channel. So again, I didn't really get that shot of his of the Doctor's body because it was sort of turned into the caption. So those bits all came quite late to me. I remember my copy of Mordrin Undead, for some reason, it had the opening titles of episode 1, but then didn't have the first shot. It was a funny jump, but I didn't know, and it was only again years and years later that I realised I'd been missing the first 3 seconds of it or whatever. Now, oh, come on, Viril, don't give yourself away. I mean, Donald Douglas does a very good job with that. Donald Douglas is an excellent actor. Bridget Jones, he's in the Bridget Jones movies. He lives in France. He was in Poldark. There was a lovely thing, I was going to say recently, but it was probably 20 years ago, where, because he and Robin Ellis, who played Poldark in Poldark, I think both live in the same vicinity, and there's a bit where Donald Douglas sort of surprised him in character, for a thing. Maybe it was for a launch of something Poldarky, but that was quite nice that they live the same place. But I was lucky. I'm on the Blu-ray of this because I'm cheap and available, I think, and there was a gap, and I was helping them out. So I was able to do a Who's Round with Donald Douglas when he was interviewed for. I mean, I just basically asked him when he came in, and I okayed it with Ed Stradley, who directed the documentary, because Donald Douglas was high on my list because he's had such an illustrious career. He's in, is it the ABC Murders of the Poirot that he's in? He's in all sorts of stuff. He was even Ruth's hot dad in EastEnders. Remember Ruth, Mark Fowler's wife? I used to practice saying, I am Field Major Steyer of the Sontaran G3 Military Assessment Survey. I used to say that. I used to practice. I used to play. I used to act. Play act. I would. My idea of fun was to fantasize about playing a being a Doctor Who actor. It's pretty grim, isn't it? I mean, what I said about Philip Hinchcliffe wanting muscular storytelling. I know this season was, influenced by the commissioning and all that sort of thing of of the previous regime. But you can tell, you can't imagine Barry Letts and Terence Dicks having this amount of torture and this amount of sort of gutsiness, the sort of gutsiness that Holmes and Hinchcliffe bring, that I think really works. I remember all of this stuff was the stuff that when I was younger was it didn't disappoint me in the way that stuff from other eras did. It matched or exceeded my my imaginings, and I think that's because all of Hinchcliffe's productions are pretty good, and Holmes now as a script editor, I think just keeps character and incident and little additions to the script that just keep it interesting or keep it real or keep it inventive. There's a lot of attention to detail, world building. Up to you lump of filth. They look great. They look really spaced out, these guys. And he's quite a genial looking fellow now, Peter Walsh. I've not met him. I was too late when they interviewed him for the Blu-ray, but I'm glad they got him. So otherwise, because if I do him, I would have done all three astronauts. Well, take that out of context. I've done all three astronauts because I've met all three astronauts from Mission to the Unknown. It's amazing. I've been so lucky. I love this scene. He is destroying the android, which is quite sad. Well, it's not that sad because I think the android is. If they'd done it in CSO, it wouldn't have worked. It would have stood out a mile. I don't even know if you could do CSO on location, but it would have looked awful. So, the decision not to do CSO, I suppose, helps. But I think the spindly legs on an obvious track. It's but I'm supposed to be accentuating the positive. But I was going to say we feel a bit sorry for the android. We shouldn't really feel sorry for the android. It's supposed to be a terrifying thing that captures and kills people. But Tom Baker does that beautifully. And of course, Tom Baker broke his collarbone in this, which is why often when he's charging about, it's Terry Walsh. Good job he was there to play Zake. But and you can sort of tell, but they make a good stab of seeing as their leading man's fallen down a ravine, and Roger Murray Leach, the designer, who I've also interviewed. God, I'm a ball. But it amazes me if I said those things. I'm a largely disappointed man, but if I'd said any of those things I've just said to you about meeting all of these people and being in their vicinity, and my 10-year-old self would have been elated, stuck in the middle of nowhere, dreaming of, my uncle was once in a lift with Tom Baker, and I thought, because my uncle, he was my exciting uncle. He lived in London, and he's an editor, and so far away from any of the rest of us, the only one that had any sort of media stuff about him at all. He was once in a lift with Tom Baker, and I was amazed he was so blasé about it. It's like, well, hang on, why isn't this the best story you've ever told anybody? He's got a real bluntness about him as well. He's not always sort of glittery, Tom Baker. He can sometimes very, just do it a very straightforward delivery. Not used to Earth's gravity. He's got such a brilliant face. Inspired casting. He is Doctor Who. But of course, and I think Roger Murray Leach said that Tom Baker was really worried because he's not long into the role. They haven't made many episodes with him, so if he's unable to do it, recast. Thank goodness they didn't. And I've broken a collarbone, and thank God he had this big coat and the scarf. I mean, that's the beauty of it's that sort of, I love that Shakespearean love thing with Jeffrey Rush keeps going. It'll work, well, because it just does. The show goes on. The show must go on. And part of the joy of creativity is it all goes wrong, and sometimes you manage to make a good show, and sometimes because of the disasters you make a better show. I don't think Tom Baker breaking his collarbone helps Sontaran Experiment, but I certainly think they cover it very well, and especially as this major fight at the end, neither of the two main characters are played by the actors that played them. It's two stunt doubles, because Kevin Lindsay had collapsed during the Time Warrior. It was discovered he'd got a heart condition, and so he wasn't allowed to exert himself too much, and that was the heart condition that sadly killed him. Yeah, I think a couple of months after this was broadcast. How sad. And that's pretty, the crushing of the ribcage of the guy that helped him is pretty grim as well. The sort of torture element is very much the Robert Holmesy, Philip Hinchcliffe muscular storytelling. A nice touch from Ian Marter there to close his eyes as he tries to open the door, because you don't know, he would worry that this is a nice bit where the Doctor jumps on Star and knocks him over. Ow, because there's big rocks flying about there, and Terry Walsh actually doesn't do a bad job of mimicking the Doctor's gait that's been imposed upon Tom Baker. Vural, I think, could get a better death. That's just and I think that's why they really emphasise it later, which goes, Vural's dead, he saved your life. They make quite a meal of it, of just going, that bit where Vural sort of got pushed over, he died, whereas in the book I think he falls down a great big ravine or crevasse, or he's chucked down a chasm, I think, and that's a shame, because I think I like Donald Douglas, and I think he deserved a better send-off. But, yeah, there we are. He's got a great quality there, Tom, because he sort of, I know he refuses to be sentimental, but he's not glib. I think he does get a bit glib sometimes later on. I'm thinking of Varsh in Full Circle, where I think he's just like. I remember I remember being quite rather liking the fact they'd gone to the effort to deflate Steyer's head, but I remember this was on the Tom Baker years, wasn't it? And I think they have him actually laughing in the corner. And I remember when I watched this at my friend Mark's house, and Mark and I shared a flat, his mate Steve was round, and Steve was really cool. Steve's in a band, and that bit. And Steve's not ill disposed to Doctor Who. I think he thinks it's sort of, it's retro, it's all right, isn't it? But he thought that was awful, and I was like, so when you see Doctor Who through the eyes of other people, I've said it before, we see body horror where some people see sellotape. And I like the fact that you get the sort of Ark in Spacey music back at the end of this. It's a nice little tie-in. But because in the book, I think you get a load of time with Harry going through, don't you, through the spaceship, and there's millions of Sontarans rather than the two. And of course, yes, this is a two-parter, so I think this is a very perfunctory ending, but you always sort of forgave it because you go, well, it's only 50 minutes long. You can't tell a very complicated story in 50 minutes. Oh, how things have changed. He's that sort of playful, that sort of ghost of a smile that crosses his face. He's but I mean, if you can deflect an alien invasion just by telling a fairly thin fib, I don't think the Earth's ever going to be in any trouble at all. I'm not sure if the Sontarans have gone to all that trouble of torturing people, which is that. I mean, that is pretty horrible. Yeah. If after they've gone to all that trouble, just some bloke they've got no idea who he is looks looks ridiculous. I like this ending. Just comes and goes. Just don't bother invading. You go, call off the invasion, lads. I don't know what that was. I like the ending. The ending's as witty and fun as the arrival, which is which brings it full circle. What a jolly breeze! There's a mixture of stuff there because it is quite a jolly and economical story that sort of, flies by, but it's got the grimness to it as well as the lightness of touch brought by the performances of the regulars. It's good, isn't it? It's good. But what to choose is slightly more difficult because there aren't lots of different places and locations. There's not much not much variety in the cast. So I will have a think about what. I've also got to think about what, because we're even Stevens as well. But and I've got to choose. Now I just have to choose another two. Is that the rules? This is so early on in this podcast because I get them to choose a bonus one. But what's the bonus one for? It's just to make it another one. Does that help me or does that help them? So I will choose. No, so I think it gives a chance to change the score just at the end. I don't know. So I will choose. I think the torture stuff, which I think is, it's bringing quite a gutsy element to Doctor Who, and they do it well because I don't think it's gratuitous and I don't think it's horrible unless you think about it. And that's what Doctor Who does at its best, where actually your mind does a lot of the damage. And Steyer, Kevin Lindsay, mixture of mask and performance. Is that quite a boring thing for me to choose? I tend to choose actors. Is there any other? Yeah, no, I will choose the torture. The plot element of the torture and Kevin Lindsay and Steyer just as a whole package. What has my friend Tom chosen?
Hello again, Toby. Well, you've watched the Sontaran experiment, and in the meantime I've moved to a different bit of the location I'm in, like they used to do on the Years tapes in the 90s. And in the last 50 minutes I have broken my collarbone, I've been captured by 3 South Africans, and I've sucked the innards from a potato. So in many ways we've had the exact same experience. Now I'll tell you my favourite things from the Sontaran experiment. Part 2. So my first of 2 favourite things from part 2 is the scene where Steyer makes Sarah hallucinate and she sees the ground trying to swallow her up. I think that was probably the first time Doctor Who terrified me, but at the same time I remember being fascinated by that effect of the ground moving and the sound of it. At the same time as being scared, I wondered how they did that. And again, isn't Elizabeth Sladen just wonderful? And my second of 2 favourite things from part 2 is the effect when Steyer's head deflates. Again, how did they do that? I thought to myself. And it's a really lovely death that feels like it stands out now. Any old villain can get shot and burst into flames, but I really love seeing one just melt away into nothing. And my favourite bonus aspect of the story, I thought it was going to be that it was all on location, but actually it's going to be that it's all on location and on videotape. I've been thinking about it as I've been wandering around, and I think while you wouldn't want Doctor Who like that every single week, I really love that it's all on videotape. Yes, film is really atmospheric, isn't Spearhead from Space marvellous, etc, etc, etc. But there's an immediacy about videotape. It really leaps out at you. If you're watching something on film, things don't move the same way that they do in real life, in your living room when you're watching it. When it's on videotape, it does. It looks exactly the same. There's something that that grabbed me about that a bit more. I really loved it. Well, I think that wraps up the Sontaran experiment, doesn't it? Thank you very much. It's been lovely to speak to you, Toby. Bye-bye.
Oh, isn't he lovely? And well, I mean, I started well. I got one in episode 1, and then I was a complete failure there. I've got to. I think I've got to keep my eye on what I choose, because I chose 2 really boring things, and that what he chose was much more interesting. I've got to keep my eye on that. I failed there, and Tom rightly, I think, is victorious in whatever, however the rules of this work, which I'm not quite sure of yet. Brinkmanship. His character Peter Fleming is utterly charming. He is a love letter to the sort of telly that people who like what we like love, and it's not cynical. It's beautifully performed. He's very lovable. He's just launched a podcast featuring the character as well. That's really nicely put together. So Tom as Peter Fleming is highly recommended if you like your archive telly and also you have a sense of humour. It's such a sweet character. So thanks to Tom. Thanks to you for joining me on my sofa to watch the Sontaran experiment. Let's do this again. Yeah, don't go changing. You understand? I'll see you next time. Ta-ta.
I hope you enjoyed it, and if any of your viewers at home would like to see anything else I have to offer, please do look up Peter Fleming on Twitter. He is my comedy character. He is an entirely fictional, retired BBC children's pioneer whose classic shows like Professor Zaney's Mad Laboratory and Nicholas the Mischievous Cupboard have all sadly been wiped from the archives, presumably by mistake, and he's determined to find any copies again. Basically, if you're watching this, you'll probably like it, unless, as I've referenced before, if you live in Derbyshire. But statistically, that seems unlikely.
Peter Fleming can be found at Peter Fleming TV on Twitter. That's at Peter Fleming TV. And his real-life alter ego, Tom himself, Tom Burgess, can be found at Tomb_Urges. Tomb_Urges on Twitter. So Tomb Urges and Peter Fleming TV are the 2 places to go if you've enjoyed Tom's contribution and want to see more of him, which you definitely should. Thank you for listening to Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Haydock. My special guest was the comedian Tom Burgess. Next time on Happy Times and Places, we've got a beetle stuck in our sliding doors. It's turn left. The music was by Dave Gates. Special thanks go to Chris Boyle, and the artwork was by Dylan Patterson. Please go to www.tobyhaydoke.com for more, and don't forget to rate, thumbs up, and generally be nice about this podcast everywhere that you possibly can. It's easy for you, and it helps me, and I'm very grateful. You can support these podcasts and any other of my broadcasting endeavours at patreon.com/TobyHaydoke and ko-fi.com/TobyHaydoke. Patrons get special goodies and advance releases, and my eternal gratitude. Doctor Who is BBC copyright, and no attempt has been made to infringe that copyright. Please subscribe to the official Toby Haydock YouTube channel.